I wake up every morning at 5:40. Not because I have to, because I no longer have to. At 69, your body becomes its own alarm clock. My knees crack before my eyes open. The radiator ticks twice. The old coffee maker on the kitchen counter hums like a tired insect when I press the switch. I measure the grounds carefully. 2 level scoops, never heaped. Waste irritates me. The apartment smells faintly of furniture polish and yesterday's toast. It's a modest 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a brick building on Jefferson Street. Beige carpet, oak table with one leg slightly shorter than the others. I folded cardboard under it. A leather armchair by the window where the morning light falls exactly at 6:12 in March. Unemployed loser. That's what my son called me. He said it with a smile. It was October 14th, 2024. I remember because I still have the parking receipt from the Hyatt Regency, $28 for 3 hours, though I stayed for 2.5. His company was hosting a networking gala. Black tie crystal glasses. Waiters carrying shrimp skewers that smelled of garlic and money. I wore my only tuxedo, the one I bought for his wedding in 2011. It still fits. Mostly. Dad, Daniel said when I approached his group. This is Mr. Kavanaugh, our regional director. Kavanaugh shook my hand. Firm grip. Expensive watch. And this, Daniel added, clapping me on the shoulder, is my father. He's enjoying early retirement. His wife, Melissa, laughed lightly. That a nice way of saying he's an unemployed loser now that he sold his little construction thing. There it was, unemployed loser, said casually, like a garnish on a plate. A few polite chuckles followed. Not cruel, not kind either. I smiled. I've had 50 years of practice. I suppose I am unemployed, I said, though I try not to lose at things. Kavanaugh laughed louder than necessary. The conversation shifted back to EBITDA margins and expansion into Arizona. Daniel didn't look at me again for 20 minutes. The truth is simple. I built a regional commercial construction firm from nothing. 27 years. Steel warehouses, municipal contracts, 2 medical office buildings. I sold it in 2019 for $3.4 million before taxes. After settling capital gains and distributing bonuses to senior staff, I cleared $2.1 million. I invested conservatively. Treasury ladders, dividend funds, municipal bonds. I pay myself $8,500 a month. Unemployed. Yes. Loser? I've seen worse. But that word, loser, lingered like cheap cologne, especially considering the numbers. Let me explain the numbers. On May 3rd, 2022, I signed a personal guarantee for Daniel's business expansion loan. $480,000 revolving credit line through Northern Atlantic Bank. Prime plus 2.75%. He needed backing. He said, Dad, it's just a formality. The company's solid. Revenue hit $2.8 million last year. This lets us scale. Scale is a dangerous word. 2 months later, July 18, 2022, I refinanced my lake cottage, paid off, mind you, to extract $220,000 in liquidity. Daniel said the bank wanted additional assurance to secure better terms. It's temporary, he promised. 12 months max. I transferred $180,000 directly to the company's operating account on July 22nd. I still have the confirmation slip point 10:43 a.m. Over the next 18 months, there were bridges. $25,000 in November 2022 for supplier delays. $60,000 in February 2023 when a client pushed payment. $75,000 in September 2023. Short-term cash flow gap. Altogether, including interest and fees, my exposure crossed $700,000. I never mentioned this at dinner parties. It ruins the shrimp. After the Hyatt incident, I drove home slowly. The city lights blurred through a thin drizzle. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Daniel. Hey, Daddy said. Background noise, laughter. Glass clinking. You get home okay? I did. About earlier? Melissa was joking. You know how she is. I do. She didn't mean anything by it. People always mean something. I'm not offended, I said. A pause. Good, he replied quickly. Anyway, listen. I might need to extend the credit line another 6 months. Just paperwork. I'll send you the updated covenants. Paperwork. I'll review it. I said. You trust me, right? That question always comes right before you shouldn't. I've trusted you with more than paperwork, Daniel. Silence on the other end. Then a soft exhale. Thank Dad. I've got to get back. The line clicked dead. I stood in my kitchen afterward, staring at the coffee maker I hadn't cleaned. The digital clock blinked 11:02. Unemployed loser. Strange phrase for a man underwriting your ambition. 2 weeks later, November 1st, I received a letter from Northern Atlantic Bank. Thick envelope. Corporate letterhead. Notice of covenant monitoring. Nothing alarming at first glance. Routine language. Debt-to-equity ratios. Liquidity thresholds. But there was a paragraph. Page 3. Should the guarantor wish to withdraw or modify personal guarantee 3030. Days written notice required prior to covenant breach event. Withdraw. Modify. I read that line 4 times. At 8:15 a.m. the next morning, I made coffee. 2 little scoops. Never heaped. Then I opened my filing cabinet. Bottom drawer. Red folder. Daniel guarantees. I laid out every document on the oak table. The original May 2022 agreement. The July refinance paperwork. Wire confirmations. Amended covenants dated January 2024. My hands were steady. I have built buildings from rebar and dust. I know what load-bearing means. Sometimes the beam you reinforced decides you are decorative. That morning, for the first time, I asked myself a quiet question. If I am an unemployed loser, why am I carrying the entire structure? I folded the documents carefully, placed them back in the red folder, and for the first time in 2 years, I considered what would happen if I stopped. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. On December 3rd, 2024, Daniel came over for dinner. He rarely visits my apartment. Says parking downtown is a nightmare. That night, he brought a bottle of Cabernet that cost more than my monthly electricity bill. He placed it on the counter like a peace offering. Thought we'd catch up, he said, loosening his tie. Melissa didn't come. Book club, he explained. She doesn't read. I made pot roast. The cheap cut, chuck, slow cooked for 6 hours with carrots, onions, bay leaf. Mashed potatoes with too much butter. Food that doesn't pretend. He looked around the apartment while I plated the food. You ever think about upgrading? He asked. Maybe a condo closer to the lake? I like knowing exactly where my walls are, I said. We sat at the oak table. The cardboard under the leg shifted slightly when he leaned forward. He noticed. You should fix that. It works, I replied. For the first 10 minutes, we spoke about neutral things. His son's soccer league, a new client in Nevada, traffic. Then he cleared his throat. So, about the extension. There it was. He took out his phone and opened a PDF. We're restructuring the line, increasing it to $650,000. It positions us for Q2 growth. Increasing, I repeated. It's leverage, Dad. Everyone does it. Everyone doesn't sign personal guarantees at 69. He forced a smile. You're not exactly strapped for cash. The words were light, casual, but I felt them land. I'm not strapped, I agreed, but exposure isn't a hobby. He exhaled sharply. You don't believe in me. I cut a piece of meat, chewed, swallowed. I believe in numbers. He leaned back. Revenue hit $3.6 million this year. Profit. A pause. We reinvested. Profit, I repeated. Margins are tight right now because we're scaling. Scaling again. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, refilled his glass. When I returned, I noticed something else. His watch was new. Platinum bezel. I know watches. That one wasn't under $18,000. Business good enough for upgrades? I asked mildly. He followed my eyes. Image matters in my industry. Of course it does. Dad, he said, lowering his voice. I need you to sign the amended guarantee by Friday. The bank's pushing. Why? Routine. Why are they pushing? His jaw tightened. There's a covenant threshold we brushed against last quarter. Temporary. Nothing serious. Define brushed. Dad. Define brushed. He looked down at his plate. Debt to EBITDA hit 4.8. Covenant is 4.5. How long? 1 quarter. And receivables? Extended. How extended? 45 to 60 days. I nodded slowly. Numbers tell stories children don't. Send me the full financial package, I said. Audited. It's internal. Then make it external. His fork hit the plate harder than necessary. You're acting paranoid. I'm acting solvent. He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. Do you know how humiliating it is, he snapped, to have to ask your father for backing at my age? There it was again. Humiliation. I didn't force you to build a house on borrowed steel, I replied quietly. You don't get it, he said. You had it easy. Different market. Less competition. I almost laughed. I poured concrete in February with frost cracking under my boots. I mortgaged your mother's jewelry to make payroll in 1998. Easy isn't the word I choose. He grabbed his coat. Fine. Forget it. I'll handle it another way. Daniel? He paused at the door. I'm not your enemy. Could have fooled me. The door closed with a soft click. I sat back down. The pot roast had gone cold. 3 days later, December 6 th 9:17 a.m., I received an email from Northern Atlantic. Subject: Updated exposure summary. I printed it. Outstanding balance on the revolving line: $612,430. Utilization: 94%. Accounts payable aging over 90 days: $187,000. Personal guarantee coverage: 100%. I stared at the last line for a long time. Coverage: 100%. Not partial. Not shared. Mine. At 11:02 a.m., my phone rang. Melissa. Her voice was sharper than usual. Daniel says you're hesitating. I'm reviewing. You know what happens if you pull out? She asked. I do. People talk. People always do. She exhaled loudly. He works himself sick trying to build something. And you sit in that apartment counting dividends. I let the silence stretch. You think he'd survive without you? She pressed. That's the question, I said. You're punishing him because of a joke. This again. This isn't about shrimp and small talk, I replied. It's about liability. You'll destroy his reputation. No, I said evenly. His ratios might. Another silence. Colder. If you loved him, she said quietly, you'd sign. Love. Such an efficient weapon. I loved him when I co-signed his first car loan, I said. When I wired $75,000 last September. When I refinanced a paid-off property at 70. You're exaggerating. I keep receipts. She hung up. On December 12th, I met with an attorney. Martin Feld, 64, cautious eyes. Gray tie slightly crooked. He read the guarantee carefully. You're fully exposed, he said. If there's a breach event, they come to you first. I'm aware. You can withdraw with notice, he continued, tapping the paragraph I'd memorized. But if they're already near breach, timing matters. How near? Hard to know, without inside books. I nodded. He looked at me over his glasses. May I ask, why did you sign this in the first place? I considered the question. Because he's my son. Feld sighed softly. That's not a financial instrument. No, it isn't. As I left his office, the winter air felt sharper than it had a month ago. Cleaner, too. At 4:30 p.m., I sat in my leather armchair. The radiator ticked twice. I opened the red folder again. This time I didn't just look. I drafted a letter. 30-day notice. Intent to withdraw a personal guarantee upon expiration. I didn't send it yet. But for the first time since May 3rd, 2022, the structure no longer felt entirely on my shoulders. On January 9th, 2025, at exactly 8:42 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I was buttering toast. Thin layer. Even spread. I dislike excess. Mr. Whitaker, the woman asked. Yes. This is Angela Ruiz from Northern Atlantic Bank's Commercial Risk Department. Risk. That word never calls to say hello. I'm reviewing the Whitaker Logistics Revolving Facility, she continued, voice calm, rehearsed. As you are the primary personal guarantor, we're required to notify you of a potential covenant breach. I sat down slowly. What kind of breach? Debt-to-EBITDA ratio exceeded 5.2 as of December 31st. Additionally, there are receivables aged beyond 120 days, totaling $264,000. That was not brushing. That was falling. And what does that trigger? I asked. A technical default notice will be issued within 5 business days unless the company injects capital or reduces outstanding balance by at least $150,000. Injects capital. I knew what that meant. Has Daniel been informed? I asked. Yes, sir. He was notified yesterday afternoon. Yesterday. He hadn't called. And if there's no remedy? I pressed. The bank may accelerate repayment. As guarantor, you would be liable for outstanding principal and accrued interest. Current exposure stands at $618,940. $618,940. It's strange how numbers that large can feel both abstract and suffocating. I appreciate the notice, I said. After we hung up, I didn't move for a full minute. The radiator ticked once. The toast cooled in my hand. Then I reached for the red folder. At 9:17 a.m., I sent the letter. Certified mail. Email copy to the bank and Daniel. 30-day notice of withdrawal of personal guarantee effective February 8th, 2025. The subject line was simple, formal notice. No emotion, no explanation. Just load-bearing steel removed with documentation. Daniel called at 9:43 a.m. What the hell did you just do? He demanded. I exercised a contractual clause. You blindsided me. I was blindsided yesterday. You could have talked to me first. I tried in December. This is temporary, he snapped. We're closing 2 major contracts in Q1. This is timing. Then the numbers will improve without my signature. You're panicking. I'm calculating. He laughed sharply. Not humor. Nerves. You think the bank won't react? They'll tighten terms. Suppliers will hear. You're already at 94% utilization. Silence. Then softer. Dad, if they accelerate, I can't cover $600,000. I know. Then why would you do this? Because you called me a loser. But that wasn't it. I'm not your emergency fund, I said quietly. I'm your father. That's the same thing, he muttered. No, it isn't. By January 15th, the bank issued formal notice of default. Daniel forwarded it to me with a single-line email. Happy now? I read the document carefully. Acceleration clause pending. 10-day cure period. That evening, Melissa called again. You're destroying him, she said without greeting. He destroyed his ratios. He trusted you. He leveraged me. You could just wire the $150,000, and this goes away. Just as the 6 figures were spare change in a coat pocket. I've already wired over $300,000 in 2 years, I replied, plus collateralized assets. That's what parents do. No, I said evenly. That's what guarantors do. And I've resigned. Her voice sharpened. If he loses his job over this. He might, I said. She gasped softly. You'd let that happen? I looked around my small apartment. The uneven table. The quiet radiator. The life I funded without spectacle. I didn't build his house of cards, I said. She hung up. On January 21st, I received another call. This time from a man, Mr. Whitaker, Thomas Baring, Senior Credit Officer. His tone was different. Direct. With your withdrawal notice, we reassess the facility. Frankly, without your guarantee. The risk profile changes significantly. I assume it does. We're requiring immediate reduction of $200,000 to avoid full acceleration. Has Daniel secured alternative backing? He indicated he was exploring private equity. Private equity. Translation, expensive rescue. If acceleration proceeds, Baring continued, we'll pursue guarantor recovery for any shortfall occurring prior to withdrawal effective date. Understood. But I'll be candid, he added. Your withdrawal signals lack of confidence. That affects internal review. Lack of confidence. It sounded almost polite. I appreciate your candor, I said. When the call ended, I opened my desk drawer and took out something I hadn't looked at in years. The original sale agreement for my company in 2019. Page 14. Non-compete clause. Expired last year. I smiled faintly. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I understood markets. And weakness. January 28th. Daniel showed up unannounced. He looked different. Tired. Tie crooked. Eyes rimmed red. They're suspending me pending review, he said without sitting down. Review of what? Expense allocations. Vendor payments. They're questioning executive draws. How much? He hesitated. Bonuses were front-loaded against projected revenue. How much? $240,000. I leaned back slowly. Against projections. It's standard practice. When projections materialize. He ran a hand through his hair. If you rescind the withdrawal, the bank might stabilize. No. He stared at me like I'd struck him. You'd watched me lose everything? I watched you risk everything, I replied calmly. His voice cracked. I was building something. On my balance sheet. Silence filled the room. Finally, he whispered, I thought you'd always catch me. I felt something in my chest shift. Not anger. Clarity. I caught you when you were 6 and fell off your bike, I said quietly. I paid your tuition. I financed your first warehouse. But grown men build with their own steel. He sat down then, slow, deflated. They're calling a board meeting Friday, he said. If the bank accelerates, they'll terminate me. I nodded once. And if they do? I asked. He didn't answer. Outside, a snowplow scraped the street. Metal against ice. February 8th was approaching. And for the first time in months, the structure was adjusting to its real weight. February 2nd, 2025. Board meeting day. I was invited. But at 7:12 a.m., Daniel texted me a single line. Asking about you. I was in my kitchen, polishing the chrome edge of the sink with a dry cloth. It's a habit I picked up years ago. Finishing details no one notices. What about me? I replied. The answer came 2 minutes later. Why you pulled the guarantee. I imagined the conference room. Long walnut table. Frosted glass walls. Coffee in insulated carafes. Laptops open. The faint scent of anxiety masked by cologne. At 8:03 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number again. Mr. Whitaker, a measured male voice asked. Yes. James Holloway, chairman of Whitaker Logistics. Whitaker. They kept the name. That always amused me. I understand you withdrew your personal guarantee, he continued. We're attempting to assess the company's position. I exercised a contractual right. Of course, he said smoothly. May I ask why? There it was again. The same question in different suits. Risk concentration, I replied. Overextension. Executive draws misaligned with performance. A pause. You have insight into internal operations? I have access to ratios. Silence. Then, you're aware that your action has triggered a liquidity crisis. I'm aware that the crisis predated my action. Another pause. Longer. If we secure bridge financing, Holloway said carefully, would you reconsider reinstating partial coverage? No. The word landed clean. Even if it preserves your son's position? I looked at the uneven table leg. The cardboard square had shifted slightly again. My son's position, I said evenly, is a result of his management. Holloway exhaled through his nose. Understood. The call ended politely. Politeness is often the last courtesy before consequence. At 11:48 a.m., Daniel called. They voted, he said, and suspended effective immediately, pending forensic audit. Forensic. That word carries weight. They're saying misrepresentation of projected earnings to secure extended credit, he continued, voice hollow, and inappropriate timing of executive compensation. How much total? I asked. Bonuses and distributions? He swallowed audibly. $312,000 over 18 months. I closed my eyes briefly, and the bank accelerated the line. Full repayment demanded within 10 days. 10 days. And your equity? Diluted? They're bringing in a restructuring firm. Restructuring. A clean word for demolition. I told him you lost confidence in leadership, he added bitterly. I did. You could have warned me. I did. In December. He didn't respond. I heard voices in the background. Doors closing. The echo of a space no longer his. I have to clear my office, he said finally. The line went dead. February 8th arrived quietly. My withdrawal became effective at midnight. On February 10th, Northern Atlantic issued formal demand to Whitaker Logistics for $621,480, including accrued interest and penalties. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, ironically, the restructuring firm filed notice of intent to liquidate certain assets. 2 leased warehouses, fleet vehicles, office equipment. The watch Daniel wore to dinner? Likely still on his wrist. For now, he came to my apartment on February 18th. No tie this time. No polished shoes. Just a gray sweater and eyes that looked older than mine. They're selling everything, he said without preamble. Assets satisfy debt, I replied. After liquidation, there's still a shortfall. How much? 80,000. Maybe more. And the bank, they can pursue me personally. Yes. He laughed weakly. At least they can't pursue you. No, they couldn't. He stood by the window, looking out at Jefferson Street. I thought I was ahead, he said quietly. Everyone else was leveraging, expanding, posting growth. Growth without margins, theater, I said. He turned toward me, anger flickering. You think I wanted this? I think you believe scale would outrun discipline. That's business. That's gambling. Silence. I was trying to prove something, he admitted finally. To whom? He hesitated. To you. That surprised me. You called me an unemployed loser, I said. His face tightened. It was a joke. It wasn't. He sat down heavily in the leather chair. When you sold the company, he said, staring at his hands, everyone treated you like some legend. I wanted that. You had it, I said quietly, until you borrowed it. The room felt smaller. I don't know what I'm going to do, he said. You'll find work. At 42? With this on my record? Yes. He looked up sharply. You think it's that simple? No, I said. I think it's necessary. He studied me for a long moment. You really won't help cover the shortfall? I held his gaze. Already did. The radiator ticked twice. He nodded slowly, as if something finally settled inside him. Not acceptance, but reality. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. I was wrong, he said quietly. About you. I didn't answer immediately. After he left, I walked to the filing cabinet. The red folder was thinner now. Liability removed. Exposure closed. I returned to the kitchen, measured 2 level scoops of coffee, and turned on the machine. Unemployed. Yes. Loser? No. And for the first time since October 14th, the structure stood on its own weight. Without me. By March 12, 2025, Whitaker Logistics no longer existed as an operating entity. The sign came down first. Daniel sent me a photograph of it. 2 men in reflective vests unscrewing the brushed aluminum letters from the office facade. The W tilted awkwardly before they lowered it into the back of a pickup truck. He didn't add a caption. He didn't need to. Liquidation cleared most of the bank's exposure. The warehouses sold at auction for less than projected. The fleet, 5 lease trucks and 3 company SUVs, went quickly. Office furniture fetched almost nothing. People rarely pay much for ergonomic chairs once the illusion of productivity evaporates. After asset sales and insurance recovery, the remaining personal liability settled at $73,400. Daniel negotiated a structured repayment plan over 36 months. No prison, no headlines, just consequence. It's rarely cinematic. On March 28th, I received a final statement from Northern Atlantic confirming closure of the facility. Guarantor obligation terminated effective February 8th, 2025. I read that line twice. Then I placed the letter into a new folder. Not read. Gray. Closed. That same afternoon, I did something Daniel didn't know about. I called my investment advisor and liquidated $250,000 from a municipal bond position. Not for him. For something else. 2 weeks later, on April 10th, I met with Martin Feld again. We drafted a trust, the Whitaker Education Trust, irrevocable beneficiaries, my 2 grandchildren, conditions, tuition, accredited programs only, no early distributions, no collateralization, no executive bonuses disguised as loans. Daniel was named contingent trustee only upon completion of his repayment plan and financial literacy certification. Feld raised an eyebrow when I inserted that clause. Petty, he asked gently. Preventative, I replied. Daniel found work in May. Mid-level operations manager at a regional freight company. Smaller salary. No corner office. No platinum watch. He sold it to make the first debt payment. We had coffee on May 22nd. Neutral territory. A diner on Route 9. Vinyl booths. Coffee that tastes like obligation. He looked thinner. How's the new job? I asked. It's structured, he said carefully. That can be healthy. They don't let me touch projections. I nodded. We sat in silence for a moment, watching a waitress refill sugar dispensers. I used to think you were afraid of risk, he said finally. I am. That's not weakness? No, I said. It's memory. He stared into his cup. I hated feeling smaller than you, he admitted. I never asked you to compete. You didn't have to. I studied his face. There was less edge now, more fatigue, perhaps more honesty. I didn't pull the guarantee to punish you, I said. I know. I pulled it because I realized something. What? That love without limits becomes liability. He let that sit. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For the gala. For the words. Unemployed loser. Strange how phrase can unravel and then disappear. I've been called worse, I said lightly. But not by me. No, not by him. We paid separately. That felt right. In June, Melissa requested a meeting. She arrived at my apartment precisely at 3:00 p.m., wearing less jewelry than usual. I misjudged you, she said before sitting down. Common pastime, I replied mildly. She didn't smile. I thought you were withholding support out of pride. I was withholding exposure out of prudence. She nodded slowly. Daniel's different now. Yes. He doesn't talk about scaling anymore. That's good. She hesitated. The trust, she said carefully. He told me. I assumed he would. Why not just give it to them outright? Because I'm not financing theater. Silence. You're not a loser, she said finally. No, I agreed. She left shortly after. The radiator ticked once. On July 14th, 2025, exactly 9 months after the gala, I received a handwritten note from Daniel. Not an email, not a text, paper. I thought you were unemployed because you stopped working. It read, Now I understand you stopped because you had already built enough. He enclosed a copy of his first repayment receipt. $2, 038.90. Modest, consistent. I placed the note in the gray folder. Life returned to its smaller rhythm. Morning coffee, 2-level scoops, oak table with cardboard wedge, dividend statements arriving quietly in the mail. Occasionally, Daniel calls not to ask for money, to talk about process improvements, about cost controls, about the discipline of margins. He listens more now. I speak less. Last week, I walked past the Hyatt Regency. Another networking event glowed through the glass facade. Men in tuxedos. Women laughing lightly over shrimp skewers. For a moment, I considered going in. Then I smiled and kept walking. Unemployed. Yes. I no longer build warehouses. I no longer sign guarantees. I no longer carry structures that refuse to stand. But loser? No. Because the day I pulled that guarantee, I didn't destroy my son. I gave him something far more valuable than $600,000. I gave him gravity. And at my age, that's the only leverage worth keeping.